Chiefs Xavier Worthy is finishing his rookie season on a high, and Saquon Barkley just cannot be stopped. We discuss the fantasy future for the Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, and Commanders on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. No, I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5 and you'll win and score $200 in bonus bets if you win. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, I know a lot of people didn't want this matchup in the Super Bowl, but we get the Chiefs versus the Eagles. Patrick Mahomes keeps doing his thing. He is unstoppable in the playoffs. But I think we should start with the most exciting player of the game, especially when it comes to the future of fantasy football. It's Xavier Worthy, their first round wide receiver. He really showed up in this game, made a lot of big plays, and does it give you more confidence in, taking him in the middle rounds next season?
Yeah, he's going to go in with the hype that we had for Rashee Rice this year, although Rice was a little bit down because of Worthy, right? Just the presence of him and Travis Kelce, what was going to be the pecking order of these younger receivers. Then you were worried about, at that time, Marquise Brown and what he would be doing here as an addition from the offseason. It looked like it might be a Hollywood Brown game. He got some looks early. You got Juju Smith-Schuster getting in there and making some big plays once again to remind everyone that he is on the Chiefs. And then you had DeAndre Hopkins just not that involved. But you had Xavier Worthy. They kept going back to that same well. And the funny thing is, all my Prize picks I was excited about, but that's the one that came through. Xavier Worthy running a little bit. He ran. He got wide open against Kyrie Elam. It was a bad break for the Bills that they lost Christian Benford in the game so early, because then it opened up an easy matchup to exploit all season or all game long here with Worthy. And look, I think Patrick Mahomes had trust in Worthy, and now I think what you're seeing with a lot of these young receivers, you see a complete receiver, right? That happened with Brian Thomas Jr. as a rookie. He started out as a deep threat, had some opportunities there. Then, wait, this guy can do a little bit more than stretch the field and use his strength and speed. I mean, he can do a little bit more, and now he can get in the open field. We just want to get him the ball in a space, and that's what the Chiefs do really well, get guys going after the catch. So, again, Rashee Rice, remember him? I mean, that injury and all that, and what they were going to do and find these veterans. Well, it didn't matter because Worthy is kind of taken over as what Rice was last year. And it's even allowed them, if Travis Kelce has a quiet game, Worthy can be the go-to guy.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if Travis Kelce does come back. I mean, he was a complete ghost in this game. 2 receptions, 19 yards. Not what we were expecting. Yeah. Not what he's ever done in the playoffs and forever. But of course, when I finally say 14 straight games with 70 receiving yards, he disappears. Yeah. I'm really good at throwing out those notes and then them, just completely dying off. But, if Kelce retires, and we'll see what happens to Rashee Rice. Does he come back? He should be healthy, but he also has those off-field concerns too, right? We'll see if he gets any suspension for that. But it might be very interesting with Xavier Worthy if he can get more targets next year more consistently. And in the second half of the season, he has. Now, like we brought up Travis Kelce, we were already fading him anyways next year, no matter what he did in this postseason. But I mean, with the way he's faded off this season and in this postseason, maybe he hangs it up, especially if they win the 3rd Super Bowl in a row. I think what was also really interesting, though, was, again, Isaiah Pacheco just not good in this game and not really used. It was all Kareem Hunt, and he looked great. And do they re-sign Kareem Hunt or just completely try to find a replacement for Isaiah Pacheco, either in the draft or free agency?
Yeah, Kareem Hunt has made a good case to have his second tenure of the Chiefs go a lot better than his first. I mean, his first ended on a very sad note overall, just with the situation on what was going on and how they had to move on from him. But it seems like he's kind of rebuilt himself a little bit off the field with the Browns, whatever you want to say. But What we do know is that this guy was the rushing champion in the Andy Reid offense in the entire league. So he is capable of doing a lot of things. I think what happened is the Chiefs' run blocking wasn't as good this year. That's something they're going to have to think about. Trey Smith is a free agent. He's one of the best free agents out there at any position. That isn't T. Higgins. So when you look at that, yeah, that might be a tough re-signing, right? Smith has been a rock there. I know they've invested quite a bit on Joe Thuney and Creed Humphrey, but I think they would make him a priority to keep that interior together, which is important to have those three guys play. I don't want to see any more of this Caliendo guy. He wasn't that good. Just don't get him in there. So block well in the interior. That's going to help Kareem Hunt in the system. So I think if I'm the Chiefs right now evaluating my backfield, I think Hunt is a little bit more valuable to what I want in the future than Pacheco. And we'll see what they do. Again, they just moved on from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They held on to him too long as a first-round pick. So, I don't know. Hunt is a guy that every time he seems to be in the Chiefs system, he does the little things right. So, I'm excited to see where we go, but I think I would keep him and maybe fade Pacheco maybe as a backup back here.
Yeah, and even if it is Hunt and they do keep him, I don't expect him to be like the clear-cut
No.
lead back going into next year. They'll give him competition. He'll share the backfield. But unfortunately, I think Pacheco's fantasy value is dying. Now, moving over to the Eagles, the other team that made the Super Bowl this year, beat up on the Commanders, but really the Commanders just made a lot of stupid mistakes. We'll get to them. Saquon Barkley, though, is just so stinking good. I mean, how many 60-yard runs can he break off? It's insane what he's doing this year, but on just 15 carries, he scores 3 times, has 118 rushing yards, an average of 7.9 yards per attempt, breaks off another 60-yard run in there. I mean, he's so good. And I think more and more as like, I'm happy we got to see him in the playoffs too, because I may have overthought it next year and went with Bijan 101, but the more we're watching Barkley, he has to be the 101 next year.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his volume, especially with Kellen Moore. We'll see. Kellen Moore is getting second or whatever interview with the Saints, so we'll see if that changes things. This was the run heaviest team in the NFL. They're running 56% of the time, and that's what led to this big rushing total. My only concern, we talked about a little bit, is this volume just adding up, right, through all these games? And maybe the Eagles realized that a little bit too, right? After his long run, he was like, where's Saquon? He's not in the game for a while. Kenneth Gainwell was in there. Then Gainwell had the concussion. And then the end of the game, they were like, okay, we don't need him out there. Look, he could score 4 touchdowns to tie the record by Raheem Mostert, right, in a playoff game. But they said, we're not going to do that. We're going to get Will Shipley a chance, see what we have. So I'll say the one thing is we've seen it before with McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. The one guy that was able to defy that was Derrick Henry. After a high volume and a rushing title, he just came back and did something, but he still was not at 1,000 yards that season. There was a little bit of regression in terms of just the wear and tear, right? You're going to have some attrition the next season. So that's just my little buyer beware. I say if you get Barkley, we'll see what they do with Gainwell. I think I want to make sure I insure him pretty well. I'm fine taking him 101, but make sure you insure him because I think there's going to be some injury stuff next year. I mean, he's got it in the past, and history shows us when a back gets this much volume, and not just through the regular season, but through the playoffs, he's going to be a little bit worn down the following year. So this is a long, long way to go with a lot of carries this season for Barkley.
Yeah, next year we might actually have a clear-cut backup for him. I mean, Will Shipley got his first chance, broke off a 57-yard run. He was a 4th-round pick this year. Next year, maybe he'll be the clear backup, and we'll have a clear handcuff for Saquon. I want to talk about Dallas Goedert. Like, A.J. Brown finally has a good game. We know when he gets single coverage, he's going to be able to win. Even, like, he destroyed Marshawn Lattimore in that one deep play yesterday, but pretty much the whole game. Lattimore has not looked good with the Commanders. But we know A.J. Brown's going to be up and down depending on if the Eagles are just going to run the ball all day or not. If they're going to pass, A.J. Brown's going to have a fine game. But Dallas Goedert, I think he's looked so good this postseason. I would really like them to use him more in the regular season. Had 85 yards yesterday, and I like how they're using him in the little screenplays. I think he looks fast out there. I think he looks good, and I would love to see him used more. Maybe he's like one of those sneaky late guys to take next year if they're finally going to start using him.
Yeah, I think this is some of the Kellen Moore influence. I know part of that continuity and usage for Goddard was hurt by him not being out there, right? He missed a good chunk of games, so you couldn't get him in the flow the way they wanted in the passing game. And now you've seen him play consecutive games and be out there. They even gave him some little rushing attempts, right? Which is also interesting that they're using Dallas Goedert in different ways. But I think what Kellen Moore is realizing, I have a real athlete on my hands, and I need to get him the ball in open field sometimes. And I've always thought about this with Goddard. Like, why does he just have these random big games where he has like 80 yards and no scores? Like, he's clearly an athletic talent who can get open. And we talked about this all season long. The Chiefs, one of their biggest defensive weaknesses, maybe the biggest, is just covering tight end. So I would not be surprised if Dallas Goedert is a big factor in Super Bowl 59.
Now, the Bills and the Commanders lost yesterday. We're going to discuss their early offseason questions, what they have to fix. And the first thing, obviously, the Bills need to get Josh Allen some receivers, please. We'll get into that right after the break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. You need a partner who works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in for you. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one convenient place. It's easy. Just post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And there's a pro tip. Add the hiring frame hashtag to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. It's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, let's look at the losers of the championship games. And let's start here with the Bills. We will get to the Commanders in our last segment. The Bills, heartbreak again. Josh Allen couldn't get over the hump. So let's start with this. I mean, Josh Allen didn't win in reality, but he owned the Chiefs in the regular season. Does this playoff loss change anything with what we think of as Josh Allen in fantasy going forward?
No, I mean, he finished as a quarterback 2 this year in points per game this season behind only Lamar Jackson. And that's even including week 18, and he didn't even play. He started one snap just to get his start in. But from weeks 1 through 17, he averaged 23.7 points per game. And that's with, throwing to Matt Collins and Khalil Shakir and a broken Amari Cooper and a terrible Dalton Kincaid and Ken Coleman, who just didn't show up as a rookie. Like, if he could do this and put up these fantasy numbers with this talent, and then also like they didn't even let him throw all too much this year either compared to previous years, like he's fine. This was also like his 5th straight year with 40 plus touchdowns. No one else has done that, even close. I don't think anyone else has even had 3 straight years. So Josh Allen's a beast. He'll be fine. Get him some weapons though, please.
Yeah, Joe Brady returning is huge news. He's out of the mix. I mean, one job left, Saints. And we thought Joe Brady might be in danger because that's where he once was with Sean Payton and an assistant there, but he's not going back to the Bayou. He's staying here with Josh Allen in Buffalo, which is great news because Josh Allen had a big season, but this offense in general just looked a lot more efficient with him there without making the mistake. So he cut down on the turnover, so no minus points, put up more scoring overall, even with less volume. He was still a dominant runner and put up points. What else do you want, right? So the biggest development I think we've seen with Joe Brady, however, is James Cook. Now, we've talked about how high we want to take Barkley and some of these other guys, but James Cook did have 16 touchdowns to tie Derrick Henry. He's a touchdown machine in the playoffs. He had that great high-effort run here. What are you doing with James Cook next year? Because I think he's locked and loaded in his prime and looking great with Brady. And, again, this was maybe the best story of this Bills season, that Josh Allen was hogging all the touchdowns, but he left a lot for James Cook to finish and look really good this season.
I think my worry is because he looks so good in these playoffs. Every time he touched the ball, he was like electric, that he's going to go too high next year. He finishes the RB10 in points per game this season in half PPR, and he scored 18 touchdowns. So 16 rushing, 2 receiving. 18 touchdowns is not an easy thing to replicate, right? And him scoring 16 rushing touchdowns is also a very hard thing to do when you're playing with Josh Allen. So I don't expect his touchdowns to be nearly what it is this year. And he still only finished as RB10. He just does not get used as a receiver enough at all. And they like to bring in other backs. I mean, even yesterday when James Cook was looking so good, they decided even on their biggest drive of the game to give Ty Johnson the first carry on the drive. Like, I don't know if Joe Brady's actually very smart or he's just playing with Josh Allen. But so, yeah, they don't utilize him enough. And I think his touchdowns are bound to go down. So, and I think he's going to be drafted higher than the running back 10 next year, which he probably should be. I just don't know his upside if he scored 15 points per game with 18 touchdowns. So I probably will be off of him at cost, but I don't think he's necessarily a bad pick.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, they kind of build him as a really good receiver, right? Coming in like, oh, he's going to be a versatile receiver, but then they drafted Ray Davis, who was also like this. And then the biggest touchdown of the year they had was Ty Johnson sliding down and making a catch from the backfield. So in a way, it's almost like other guys have become specialists and they want to preserve James Cook a little bit more because he also happens to be right now their best power runner. So I think they tried, right? With other guys were in there and Latavius Murray, that they try to toss him into the mix, but then they realized, look, James Cook is our best power runner. So that's one thing Brady did figure out. But then it came with the expenses. We're not going to push him into this. And then when you have a running quarterback, some of those checkdowns also go away, right? Allen just takes off and runs instead of checking it down to him. I was shocked that he actually gave James Cook the ball at the goal line. I thought for sure he was going to try to run it in or do a play action pass. So he did somehow, Brady convinced Josh Allen, hey, give it to Cook sometimes. He's good. He can help you. You don't have to take all the hits at the goal line. He can score. But you're right. Touchdown regression can be there because there were some games, right, where he had like 30 – I think there was one game where he had 30 yards rushing, but 2 touchdowns. So it kind of was an okay game, but you didn't get a lot more out of it. I don't think, I think you're right. If he goes at RB 6 to 8, way too expensive. If he somehow drops like RB 12 to 14, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's just not going to happen. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Now, for the receiving options here, like Keon Coleman, really disappointing rookie year, didn't really do anything at all. He was kind of forced into this wide receiver 1 role for the team, this X role. That's not really what he shined in college. So maybe they can get a true wide receiver 1 in here, let him play a better role. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if next year he looks much better as an NFL wide receiver. I still think it's going to be way too inconsistent, though, to ever want him for fantasy. Maybe our best hope is like a Gabe Davis type, right? Maybe some long touchdowns. Yeah. But I think the biggest disappointment this year, one of them, it's Dalton Kincaid, how much we wanted him to break out. And it just so badly did not. And I think this ending just really stamped me like being completely over Dalton Kincaid. I mean, yesterday, I feel like this is being overlooked. That 4th down play that they didn't give the first down to Josh Allen was like a millimeter away if it wasn't actual first down. Dalton Kincaid caught the ball, right? Like, he needed 1 more inch. That wasn't even like, it was one guy tackling him and he had the space. He's 240 pounds. Just get the first down, dude. You're so weak for a 240-pound guy. And then Josh Allen being tackled by 3 guys gives you a chance to catch the ball. You're wide open. The ball hits you in the arms and you drop it. I'm sorry, if that's Dawson Knox, he does not drop that ball. If that's Travis Kelce, obviously on the other side, he does not drop that ball. So I think they're showing us why Dawson Knox is on the field so much this year, why they haven't trusted Dalton Kincaid, and why he hasn't had a bigger opportunity. And I don't know if I'm just emotional from the loss yesterday. I really wanted the Bills to win, or there's no way I'm taking Dalton Kincaid in drafts next year.
Yeah, and I thought I was wrong at first because I ripped into this draft pick when they took him. I said, why do they need a tight end? They just had Dawson Knox under contract. Oh, but they're going to sell him as a hybrid wide receiver. He's really playing wide receiver and really going to make impact plays there. So, okay, I could see that from their perspective if they move on from Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, which they did. But then they did that, and did he show up as a hybrid receiver or a top tight end? No. So the pick maybe just straight up bad. They were caught up in some athletic numbers that he put up. Brock Bowers, look, there was no like project athleticism with Brock Bowers. You knew the numbers were there, Georgia. You saw what was in front of you. The same thing this year with Colston Loveland and Tyler Ward. You saw them in big games, make catches. You know there were impact players. Even Kyle Pitts, even though he's been a disappointment, he was on the map for that Florida offense. For Dalton Kincaid, Utah, they took a shot on this athletic guy. It's not panning out. I just don't quite understand what his role is when you don't have a go-to guy. So Amari Cooper is going back in free agency. Keon Coleman is year 2 where he hardly played a key role here. Khalil Shakir is probably their best receiver, but he's a little slot dude. They're not bringing back Mac Hollins to make big plays as a random Gabe Davis. So I don't know. There's like a lot that they need to reassess here. And this is after a year they lost Diggs and Davis. They really didn't address this much and figure out answers. So that's Joe Brady's biggest homework assignment now. Figure out this receiving pecking order and roles here for Josh Allen, even going back to like Cole Beasley. And they had designed roles for these guys. And now I don't know what anyone's role is. Just random throws wherever with Josh Allen.
And what's nice is that now we're going to have a better understanding of this offense, right? We didn't know what Josh Allen would look like without Stephon Diggs. We didn't know how bad it would hurt his fantasy value. It didn't, right? So now we don't have to be worried about it next year. We've seen the year with Joe Brady. We can be a lot more confident. It'll just come down to, do they add anyone? And if how good that player is, right? And that will be if we determine if we can draft that guy. But we'll be paying attention to that this year, this offseason for sure. We're going to get into the Commanders, the other losers, and their big off-season question marks right after another quick break. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting on all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds, and you can feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. I mean, unless you're a Chiefs fan, none of us are excited to watch the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, right? So, and we all know they're going to win. So you might as well make some money while you miserably watch the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes win the MVP again. Go place your bets on them, and at least you can be happy that you win some money. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. So that's super cool about the FanDuel app as well. But yeah, it's a very easy to use platform, and you could use it all during the leading up to the Super Bowl and during the game. Plus, when you place a $5 bet, you can potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's get into the Commanders. They had a very admirable postseason, right? And even though they lost pretty badly in this game, I didn't think it was because it was too much for Jayden Daniels, right? The defense stunk, and Austin Eckler had his fumble, and I think they also had a fumble in a kick return, right, or punt return. They just made a lot of mistakes. They did, and their defense was terrible. But Jayden Daniels, I thought, still looked very composed. I am very excited to see him in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, he was fine until his team put him in a really bad situation where the predictable passing had to be, and he did have that interception in the end that Quinion Mitchell got. But look, he was fine, and then the game got out of hand. It was garbage time. Then he was just peppering Zach Ertz with targets over the middle of the field. They really couldn't do much else because they were just taking away giving them all the underneath stuff, right? So it wasn't a real game plan for much of the second half that we would have seen from the Commanders. And look, he had a great year. Terry McLaurin, that pass where they just get Terry McLaurin in open field and he goes the distance. That's a fun play. We saw it in 2 straight games. So you're set with Terry McLaurin. Zach Ertz is a free agent, but I would expect he's going to think about coming back. I mean, you had that type of game in the playoffs against your former team. Look, he loves playing with Jayden Daniels. So you get him, and I think those are the indispensables here for Jayden Daniels in year 2. If he has Ertz and McLaurin, then you can start building around. Does Diami Brown have a bigger role? Is Olamide Zaccheaus? Is he just a little slot dude that they put out there? Does Luke McCaffrey have a bigger role? I mean, they could also pivot away from Ertz if Ben Sinnott, who caught that fake punt pass, is ready for next year. So they have a lot of options. Now they just have to sort through all this to see who's the best fit for Cliff Kingsbury's offense. I think they were smart to go with the veteran. So again, I love Jayden Daniels and all his weapons. This way they can stretch field. He looked great as a runner in this game. When he had that touchdown, he juked everybody. So high ceiling for Jayden Daniels. Now we talk about how high do we want to go. Look, could he be the next guy after Josh Allen before Lamar Jackson? There's a case that you could go in this direction because I would expect the Commanders to upgrade quite a bit. If they upgrade second year in Kingsbury's system, you could just shoot through the roof. Like he could be a 30-10 guy, right? And then you're talking about, okay, now we're in that 40 combined touchdown Josh Allen territory. Sign us up. Let's go for it, and let's see what we can do here. And he definitely has the ability to put up the numbers Lamar did this year.
He does have the ability to put up what Lamar did. I think I'd still just take Lamar, though, because we're hoping Jayden Daniels turns into Lamar, right? So Lamar and Josh, I'm still going to take before Jayden Daniels. I mean, depending on how different they're going in the draft. But I do expect all those three to be going pretty early around the same spot, right? What's really what was fun about this rookie season for Jayden Daniels is he looked way better as a passer than we expected just coming into the NFL. Like he just did not skip a beat. He just came in looking very composed, a good passer, and he still led. I mean, he still broke the rookie record for most rushing yards in a season with 891. And he passed a lot more than we thought, right? So I feel like there's even more upside with his rushing than what we saw this year. There's more upside with some rushing touchdowns as well. So he could definitely outscore what he did this year. And he already was the quarterback 4 in points per game this year from weeks 1 through 17, behind only Lamar, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. So his ceiling is super, super high. I'm completely fine with people who want to take him early next year. It's going to be very different. People are taking Anthony Richardson early last year, and we're saying, why are you doing that? We had such a small sample size. We see the huge sample size with Jayden Daniels, and he looks way better as a passer than Anthony Richardson ever looked. I will say Diami Brown, I think, kind of showed his struggles in the NFC Championship, which I think it's a good thing, right? I didn't want them to go into next year being like, oh, we have our wide receiver 2. I think he kind of showed, okay, we need to upgrade our wide receiver 2, and I think that's a good thing. And then I looked at Zach Ertz's age, like, should they resign him? He's only 34. I don't know why he feels anxious to me. He doesn't turn 35 until November, and he's actually a full year younger than Travis Kelce, like more than a full year younger. So I think they need to re-sign Zach Ertz for the consistency for Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, I think he got rejuvenated playing in this offense. He mentioned how many times he liked playing with Daniel. So why would you want to give that up too early, right? It's a chance to keep playing at a high level. I think maybe Eagles, they gave up on him because they had Dallas Goedert, and that's what they want to do and turn the page there. And the Cardinals, look, he was productive there as well when they needed him in a pinch for Kyler Murray. So the parallels were there to easily say he's going to work well with Jayden Daniels. So again, free agent. Look, I think the other reason we think he's old and should retire is because his wife retired already. So from playing in the World Cup. So that probably said, why isn't Zach Ertz retiring too? He's got a Super Bowl. He can go and do his own thing. But I still think he's a very good receiver. I think there's some years that he can still put in this league. If you can catch 11 balls in a game, I don't care what the coverage is, you're still relevant in this league. So I like to see him back again. Ertz and McLaurin back. I think they'll have to sort maybe their backfield, see if they like the Eckler Robinson, reassess that a little bit, and then kind of streamline these weapons. Again, does Luke McCaffrey get a better shot next year? Again, do they need to go find legit number 2, whether it's a veteran? Are they the team that goes after T. Higgins, right? Which would seem to be a great fit. So there's a lot of things the Commanders can do to make us more excited about the offense in general.
Yeah, they definitely need to upgrade this backfield. I mean, a big reason why they lost this game was just the lack of any rushing attack from the running backs. I mean, that's why they fell behind. Also with the turnovers, that obviously hurt them as well. But I mean, Brian Robinson Jr., he had a good game last week, but that was his one good game since their bye week. 11 for 36 on the ground for Brian Robinson Jr. yesterday. Austin Eckler, 8 for 15, and he lost the fumble. It's just they need to upgrade. They cannot go into next season with either these 2 backs as their lead back. So it'd be fun though to see who they can get, because we would be excited about a running back in this offense. If obviously they need to upgrade their run blocking, but then also just upgrade the talent as well.
Yeah, and then when you have Jayden Daniels, you're going to have a high floor for that running back, because you're going to have to worry about the zone read and all that stuff that comes with it, the wrinkles, committing, and all that. And they can take a page from the Eagles book of that, being able to pivot to that and really have that success. And that's one thing the Commanders did well. They really went from spreading the field and looking at all their options to all of a sudden doing the zone read. So they really had great play calling from Cliff Kingsbury again. Great news. We know Kingsbury's going to be back, much like Joe Brady. So that's good continuity with some of these explosive offenses.
That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for listening to Locked On Fantasy Football every weekday. We will be back tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye, y'all.